Welcome back, adventurers, once again to Let's Play Chaos Head. And in the last episode, Takumi Nishijo had a series of very realistic delusions concerning Riimi Sakihata. Surprisingly too real. But of course, no matter how realistic they seemed, they were still ultimately delusions of his mind. Though, just how those delusions actually manifest the way that they do is a matter of inquiry, but for the time being, we still have the patent to look through. I found Grim in our chat room calling out to me. See what else he has to say. Apparently Grim's got fresh news. Sighing, I gave up and entered the room. Grim's still never letting that bone go. Damn it, what do you mean, totally whose eyes are those eyes? He just wanted to use the phrase. Even though I quivered in fear every time I spied those words. Oh. Well, 5 cases it is. As if the videotape of the first case wasn't enough of a development. Of course, it gave me the usual sense of gloom, but on the other hand, I was also confused. I thought Shogun and Yua would target me for sure this time. Perhaps one could say that they postponed it. Above all, I wasn't sure whether or not it was okay for me to celebrate this, especially considering the fact that somebody else has died. And of course, it's being broadcast on the internet. Of course. Not even bothering to troll anymore. Grim has just gone straight into the details. I panicked a little when Grim started giving out the details without any forewarning. I'd had enough of Guru stuff. I didn't want to hear about it. If I listened, I wouldn't be able to help imagining myself being savagely murdered. I hadn't even found out how to get a D-sword yet. But Grim just continued all the same. I went cold at the horror of it. I hugged my arms to myself. Physical debilitation. I didn't want to know anymore. Please spare me. I don't think Grim is going to acquiesce to our request there, Takumi Nishijo. My HP had long since reached 0. A psychiatrist. The moment I saw that word, my pulse skyrocketed. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Maybe I was thinking too much, but I don't think your intuition is leading you astray, Takumi. I think you're on the right track. I wanted to know for sure. I had the feeling that I needed to know for sure. After hesitating countless times, I went to the Taboo homepage and opened a piece with information on brainless. Tasteless is my word for it. Oh dear. We were right. We were right. Around dawn 23rd, the corpse of Fumio Takashina, aged 41, a psychiatrist at AH General Hospital in Shibuya, was discovered lying in the street, and the Shibuya Police Department deemed his cause of death to be physical dehydration through insufficient nutrition. Additionally, the back of Takashina's cranium was cleanly cut away, and his brain was taken out, or had been taken out. The department states that despite the removal of his brain, there is a possibility that he remained alive, even in a state akin to that of brain death. According to police investigation, Takashina had been taking time off from his job since the 10th of the month. Hate to state the obvious here, but I don't think he was taking time off due to stress. I think he was murdered in that time. Yeah. Takashina's absence was no accident or coincidence.
なんてことだ。なんて。
The name of the victim was Fumio Takashina. Dr. Takashina himself had been killed. This was aimed at me. Indeed. In the other cases, there were clearly no ties to Takumi Nishijo. But Fumio Takashina was Takumi's physician, or had been, 5 years ago. Shogun clearly meant to provoke me. That was why he'd made an example out of Dr. Takashina, whom I'd relied on so much, and murdered him.
そんな。助けて、誰か助けてくれ。
Should have told them about New Gen when we had the chance, but there's no taking this back. I screamed. My mind was turning to pulp. It felt like I was about to go crazy.
やだ。
The one person other than Rimi Sakihata whom we trusted the most is gone.
死にたくないよ、死にたくない。リミ、助けて。
I looked for Rimi. I frantically surveyed my room again and again. Not there, not there, not there. Why wasn't she there? Because she'd gone out shopping. Of course. Not too long ago. Holding my head, I lay down in place.
僕を助けて、リミ。助けてよ。どこにも行かないで。頼むよ。
She replied. When I raised my head with a gasp, Rimi was standing next to me, carrying a convenient store bag. Didn't even hear the door open there, Rimi.
リミ。
Thank God she came back for me. Relieved, I stretched out my hand towards her. Crouching, Remy took my hand in both of hers. I think it's time for us to point out our connection to New Gen at last. Remy's hand had been cool when she touched me before. Now it was amazingly warm, despite the fact that she was outside.
ここにいる。私は。怯えないで。
Well, I think we have very much reason to be frightened, given what has just transpired. Smiling gently, Remy wiped my tears away with her fingers. Unfortunately, the death of Dr. Fumio Takashina can't be wiped away just as easily. I was truly a pathetic guy, crying and screaming and cowering like this in front of a girl. But Remy had said she would stay with me. Now her warmth was the one piece of support keeping my spirit from breaking. I didn't want to let go of this hand until I acquired a D-sword. The sooner the better. Meanwhile, elsewhere, that night, the atmosphere at Miyashita Park was strange. Oh dear. There is some creepy, monotonous chanting going on there. Something truly happening. Bizarre is happening. An enormous group clustered together in the middle of the park. There must have been over 100 people among them. Almost all of them were men and women in their teens. Some were wearing school uniforms. Others were girls in fashionable casual clothing. Some were boys wearing otaku-esque glasses. Others were Ganguro high school girls, a rarity in these times. An onlooker might think this was some kind of entertainment event taking place, but close observation would reveal that the gatherers' condition was far from normal. All of them faced downward, their eyes empty and unfocused. Though so many of them had gathered here, none of them exchanged conversations with each other, instead standing in place without attempting to move a single step away. Every single one of them wore faint smiles, and all of them were muttering something under their breath. Over and over again. The words they had poured their heart and soul into repeating were, "Whose eyes are those eyes?" Those words emitted by the mouths of the 100 murmurers resounded through the park like a Buddhist sutra, flat and emotionless. Perhaps because of how bizarre they sounded, or they seemed, there was no other figures to be seen at Miyashita Park. Office ladies cutting their way through the park on their way home from work, and middle-aged women taking their dogs for a walk. Everyone grew flustered at the unnatural spectacle and turned back the way they had come. There was only one man paying attention to the peculiar group. He too appeared to have some connection to them, but he stood off to one side by himself without joining him, or them. Very suspicious, if you ask me. With his clothes, he could have easily blended in at Akihabara. A check patterned shirt, jeans, worn-out sneakers, fingerless gloves, a red bandana, and a big green rucksack on his back. He was fairly corpulent as well. to the point that his shirt buttons threatened to pop out apart at any moment. Though it was the latter portion of October and should have been rather cool out, he constantly wiped sweat from his forehead with a hand towel. I think our man is nervous. His eyes darted around as if he couldn't calm down, but his shoulders also seemed to be shaking with laughter. Aside from the group's sutra-like chant, an unidentified mechanical sound echoed through the park, emerging from his rucksack. Seems like someone has actually managed to develop a device that is exactly what Takumi Nichijou theorized. There is a familiar face. Another high school girl, this time one wearing an undone blazer, entered the park. Far from shrinking away from the odd group, she fixed her eyes on them and steadily drew nearer. She was infused with intimidating poise as she walked, her long dark hair stirring in the breeze. In sharp contrast with that, she for some reason held a half-eaten popsicle. But I think she knows full well what is going on here. She should, given that she is the reason we know about this in the first place. The group took absolutely no notice of her. Having completely entered their own world, they focused solely on continuing to recite the same words. Nor did she lift an eyebrow at being ignored. When she'd drawn up close to them, she'd abruptly stopped. There was a remarkably languorous air to her as she bit down on her popsicle. The sound of crunching leaped from her mouth when she chewed. When she finished eating and glanced at the stick remaining in her hand, she clicked her tongue a little and tossed it down by her feet. I'm guessing you didn't win a prize this time either. The look in her eyes remained sharp as she moved her gaze across the group, going one by one from face to face.
おい、なんだよお前。
The rucksack-wearing man spoke up as if he'd reached the limits of his endurance. Naturally, the girl, Sena, was aware that this man alone had been studying her for some time now. She snorted as though to mock him, and suddenly crossed her hands over each other as she extended them directly in front of her. The space around her contorted, and a long, vague, metallic shape appeared floating there. It might appear to be either a hoe or a shovel, but its shape differed subtly from both of them. The tip of its razor-sharp blade was divided in two. She gripped it with both hands when at last it had developed a distinct shape. But it didn't end there. Immediately after, a blue light burned along the double blade she held, and the air to her right at which it had pointed. In the same way as before, metal parts floated up out of the illuminated space. Upon materializing, they fused noisily with the long blade. There it is, Sena's D-sword. Quite dissimilar from Ayase's D-sword. At last they formed a ring and another trail of light streaked from it toward the right. The divided blade traced the trail as it rose. One might have thought it was a shovel or hoe. Can't imagine why you would have thought that. It had at some point metamorphosed into a giant sword. Sharp yet lovely, clean yet destructive, sinister yet beautiful. With its supreme sense of presence, the sword settled into Sena's hand. The man with the rucksack showed no reaction. He only narrowed his lips and stared at her. I wonder, does whoever this man is know what a D-sword is?
関係者じゃないだろ。あっち行けよ。
His demeanor tells me yes. His tone was thoroughly overbearing. His voice, high for a man's, demanded that Sena leave even as he stood some distance from her, waving her away. Sena, in contrast, quietly opened her mouth without the slightest shift in expression.
お前が責任者か。
More than a regular question, it was an inquiry for confirmation. Her eyes were narrowed to her. The rucksack-wearing man previously showed a previously unseen confusion.
答えろ。畑野はどこだ。
He lost interest and pulled back, but he didn't answer her. Not that she needs confirmation. The group muttering whose eyes are those eyes made not a single effort to intervene in their exchange. Or maybe it would be more appropriate to say that it hadn't even registered with them. Sena's gaze clashed with that of the rucksack man. Unless you have a good D-sword yourself, good sir, I don't think you can defend yourself. He was the first to look away.
誰だよそれ。例えしてても教えないけどな。
Falling silent, Sena swung her huge two-handed sword with ease, brandishing it as though to weigh the distance between her and him. She lowered her center of gravity and her torso leaned forward.
誤解するな。
The sword had radiated light again. But rather than the same blue as before, it had been reddish-purple light. Without warning, there rang out a sound like a woman's shrill scream. Space trembled. Not metaphorically, physically. With Sena's great sword at its center, the air itself began vibrating. Looks like Sena has made the full use of her powers, as well as the manipulation of the errors that she told Takumi about. The sword's red glow grew dazzlingly vivid. Sena took a quick, quiet breath and clenched her back teeth together. A crashing sound roared. Numerous sparks surged forth. A sonic wave had erupted as though to blow away the vibrating air. The vibration soon came under control, but the sword's red glow continued blinking, reminiscent of the pulse in one's veins. Sena gradually moved its point towards the man with the rucksack. I think your days are numbered. By now even the disinterested group had begun to evince some perplexity. They began running away, bewildered, all of them seemingly startled, as if they had just come back to themselves. Sena went on focusing on the man alone, without a glance for the rest of them. Though he had not previously demonstrated any obvious fear, he began growing flustered. Going pale, he retreated one step at a time. He shook his head like a stubborn child.
待って俺は畑野なんてやつ本当に知らないんだただ指示されただけ
Either way, I don't think she cares.
誤解するな。 と言ったはず。
Sena took no notice of his plea.
質問したのはただの挨拶代わりだ。お前が何を答えたってそれを壊すことに変わりはない。
A fierce glitter resided in her eyes. Crying up pathetically, the rucksack man turned on his heel to flee. But the scattered group, bolting left and right, or right and left, lay ahead of him. His escape route blocked, the panicking man pulled to a halt so fast he pitched about. That was when Sena leapt forward, closing the distance between them. One could never have imagined her slim arms to be capable of dealing out such a fast and ruinous blow. Sweeping along horizontally, the blade tore through the man's rucksack, together with its contents. The impact sent him flying as well. Collapsing on the ground, he rolled into a ball, holding his head and shaking all over. He seemed to have lost the energy needed to run away. He was so frightened that he lost control of his bladder, and the crotch area of his pants began to stain itself wet. Sena walked up to him, and showing no interest in the man himself, dropped her gaze to what lay inside the ripped open, broken rucksack. Sparks scattered within it, crackling. A mechanical device had been put inside it. Originally it might have been about twice as large as a modem, but the D-sword had eaten through it, shattering it to pieces. It wouldn't be of use anymore. One could no longer hear the irritating mechanical whir that had been coming out of this rucksack until a few seconds earlier.
Nozomi.
As she murmured to no one in particular, Sena's voice was tinged with loathing. There is a name that we have heard before, Nozomi, and it is apparently probably the same logo that was on the questionnaire that's been put on this device. So the Nozomi Corporation are the ones involved. And it is entirely possible given the existence of this particular device, that they are the ones that have taken the American research to an entirely different level. Meanwhile, back in Takumi, as autumn deepened, air gradually grew colder and colder. It's hard to believe that I gotten by with short sleeves only a little while ago. Unfortunately, I have the feeling that things are only going to get worse from here on out. That is going to be it for this episode of Let's Play ChäoS Head. And when we return, adventurers, Takumi Nishijo is going to have to keep moving forward one step at a time, as he comes to grips and terms with Takashina's death, as the fifth victim of the New Gen madness. As always, adventurers, until next we meet.